Houses in Boca Raton,
Your own
working.
copies.
Nicole's a nurse at the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
Mr.
Because what?
Kincaid? It's ready.
We're on.
You're on.
We're on.
There we go. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order of the Planning and Zoning Board, March 24th, 2020. And we'll start with Pledge Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you and welcome, everybody. The first order of business is the review and approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, roll call.
Mr. Kincaid?
Here.
Ms. Odo?
Here.
Mr. Einhauser? Ms. Longstreet?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Mithers?
Here.
Mr. Prentice?
Present.
Mr. Suarez?
Here.
Mr. Tisdale?
Can we seat Mr. Saras? Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hello.
We're throwing you to the wolves right away.
Yeah. Surprise, surprise.
Okay, our first order of business is going to be to review and approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, our second order of business is tree removal at 104 Spanish Oaks Lane.
No.
Good evening, everyone.
We're not doing public comment?
No comment. We're not doing public comment.
We're not doing public comment?
Okay.
Okay.
Met our new senior alternate, Victor Saris. We also have a new junior alternate, John Tisdale, who does not appear to be here at the moment. And we have a new city attorney, Mr. Lex Taylor, Douglas Law Firm. Get up and speak a little bit later and maybe tell us a little about himself. Our first order of business is two tree removal requests at 104 Spanish Oaks Lane, 36-inch diameter at breast height and 37-inch diameter at breast height. Per section 5.01.03, certain activities that require comprehensive planning and zoning board review include any tree having a trunk greater than or equal to 30 inches in diameter at breast height shall require permit approval from the comprehensive planning and zoning board. As you can see from the site plan on the overhead projector, there is a 36-inch diameter breast height oak tree right next to the back wall of a covered lanai, and then a 36-inch diameter breast height oak tree in the paver driveway in front of the house, adjacent to Spanish Oaks Lane. The property owners and applicants are here, Mr. and Mrs. Mrs. Dillinger. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Yes. Approximately how far in off the side of the driveway is that 36-inch tree? Do you know?
Looks to be about 5 feet.
Okay.
5 feet from the front, maybe 10 feet from the side.
From the side. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bonnie?
Before I count all these trees that are being removed, do you know offhand how many is being removed from the site?
Looks like a significant amount of trees. Most of the large trees are being removed. There's some smaller oak trees. There's a 15-inch diameter at breast height oak tree along the side right here that is going to be preserved. Smaller trees along the sides right here, 6-inch oak, 9-inch oak. most of the large trees are being removed, but they are in the footprint of the building. Trees that are less than 30-inch diameter at breast height don't need any approval from the board to be removed.
Any other questions? We hear from the applicant?
Right here? Come to the front, state your name and address.
Terry Dillinger, 603 Mariposa Street.
Evening.
Good evening, how are you? You know, this is a unique situation, obviously, because there's so many trees that are being removed. We did try to save what we could, but the footprint of the house, the house dimensions have to be 2,500 square feet per the neighborhood. So with the setbacks, the lot size, it's just really difficult. We are planting more trees, but there's just not a whole lot we can do with what's inside the house there. We just don't have room to do anything. Be happy to answer any questions on any of it.
Any questions for the applicant?
That 36-inch O is just too far in where the pavers are going to be.
Yeah, it's too far, the pavers, it's actually a double, and the 36-inch is hanging over where where the house would be. The 20 inches is out, but even more than that, if you look at the elevation site, that's at 13 and a half feet up, and it's just too high to build around it. The roots would be too high, so.
I needed to ask.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay. I don't have any questions.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Victor, do you know this lot? I mean, since you live in there?
I've actually met Mr. and Mrs. Dillinger before in a homeowner association meeting, so I'm familiar with this, and I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Any discussion from the board? We have a motion?
I make a motion that we allow the removal of the 36 and 37-inch diameter at breast height for Lot 11, Spanish Oak subdivision.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, good
Congratulations.
luck.
All right,
No way around that one.
no. The next item on our agenda is the conditional use, renewal of a conditional use permit.
This is a renewal for Terra and Aqua Restaurant in the Seagrove Town Center, 134 Seagrove Main Street. Monica and Simone Parisi have owned this restaurant. It'll be 5 years in May. They were granted the current conditional use they have for outdoor dining, seating, consumption of food and beverages since May 2014. So it expires, it was granted for 5 years. Expires this May. They will go before the City Commission at the April meeting for the final order granted by the commission. They're requesting that the current conditional use permit they have be renewed for as long as they own the business. In the 5 years they've owned the business, we have had no complaints, no noise issues, no police issues that I know of, no code enforcement issues, and the building department has no problem with a recommendation from this board to the commission that Mr. and Mrs. Parisi be allowed to renew their current conditional use permit for as long as they own the business. The applicant is here, Monica Parisi, to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board?
They're going, the seating arrangement outdoors, the table placement is going to remain the same.
Yes, and Mrs. Parisi has included a sketch of the
I
current
see that I
outdoor
have
seating.
on the back.
So there's no recommendation for any additional conditions
No,
on the permit? Then
No.
it's recommended that
no
we...
additional seating, no additional conditions.
Okay.
Any other questions for Bonnie? Okay, can we hear from the applicant, please?
Hi, I'm Monica Parisi from 151 Pelican Reef Drive.
We would really like to keep using the patio the way we've been doing. I can't believe it's been 5 years. So thank you for your support all these years. And to answer your question a little further, we don't generally move things around. If a group comes up that needs a couple tables fished together, or maybe someone has a request for a special dinner, we'll move them around a little bit. We don't add or we don't plan to add any other seats. And it usually doesn't get full anyway, so it's not a crowding issue.
Okay.
It's been a popular place last week when we were still open, so people could eat apart from each other. But we like being able to have the patio. It seems to be good for our customers, and we'd love to have the opportunity just to keep the permit until we're not in business there anymore. Hopefully, that'll be a long time.
Very happy that you've been in business for 5 years.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's a
Thank
great
you. We
restaurant.
signed a new 15-year lease, so let's see how
Oh,
that goes.
great.
Yeah, awesome.
Good.
This is a great restaurant. I've been
Thank
there
you.
several times.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Any questions of the applicant? Any discussion amongst the board? Any motions?
Make a motion that they are allowed to keep their application for renewal of their permit for as long as they are in operation.
Second?
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Do we normally put a time limit on it, or is, as long as it's owned, is that acceptable?
That's a
You're
little unusual.
simply making a recommendation. Whatever the board feels fit will go to the commission, and they'll review your recommendation. A time frame is required if you see fit to give it for ownership of or at least the running of that restaurant. That's your purview. If you elect to use a numerical value, that's also within your ability.
To coincide with the running of their lease.
Okay,
Do we want a term number on there, or we don't? Asking.
Well, their lease is 15 years.
Okay, and it's
you want to make it
only
for
approved
15
on the
years,
same owner, no transfer
Yeah.
allowed?
Right.
Okay, well, I wouldn't, that wasn't mentioned.
So
I
conditional
just-
use permit that goes with the owner
Yes.
for a period of 15 years?
Right.
that the
It's
motion?
no transference, right.
Right.
Could we put in there a small caveat that if we had any complaints, I don't think we will, but, just so that's there, so that we would have the right to take it back if necessary. I don't see it turning that way, but
Sure.
Okay, we have a second?
yeah, I'll,
Yes, you already
second.
seconded.
I'll second it.
So the motion is to continue the conditional use permit for a period of 15 years.
To run with their lease, I think.
To run with their lease, but to recognize also that should there be complaints or issues with the conditional use permit, that the right to review and revoke remains.
Non-transferable.
And
That's
non-transferable.
non-transferable.
If it runs with the lease, we're going to only this owner, what happens if they sell it?
It's non-transferable.
That's right.
So the
Okay,
current-
I want to
yeah.
make sure that's.
Right,
it's
okay, that's-
non-transferable.
Thank you.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Good luck, thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Perotti, I hope I said that right. Can I make it clear for the record that we did have public comment available and there was nobody that wanted to make a public comment at the beginning of the meeting?
Larry's here, do we?
He told him he could stay up there, so he could learn. He could stay up there.
Okay, our next order of business, a mixed-use file number, well, for a proposed new construction of a two-story, 19,072 square foot building.
This is a mixed-use building with proposed retail and mercantile use on the first floor, proposed business professional offices on the second floor, on 10 lots, all zoned commercial. Lots 1 through 10, Block 18, Chautauqua Beach, between 4th and 5th Streets, just north of the Tides Restaurant, across from Island South condominiums, which are between 4th and 5th Street, exactly opposite on the east side of the boulevard. It is in the mixed-use district and proposed as retail office building, 2-story, meets all the parking requirements, the setbacks for mixed use, the lot coverage, ISR ratio. It is a Key West style building with porches in front. It has the architecture and the style that the purpose of the mixed-use district was to have a mixture of retail and business uses. And it's designed with a development that exhibits physical design characteristics of pedestrian-oriented storefront, shopping, and business enterprise. Has the vertical and horizontal articulation as stipulated in section 3.02.0201 of the city's LDRs. The architect is Mike Stoffer, and the proposed buyer of the property is Scott Petro of Ginn and Petro, a local law firm. Mr. Stoffer, Mr. Petro are both here to answer any questions, and staff is here also.
Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. We hear from the applicant.
Michael Stoffer, 1093 A1A Beach Boulevard, St. Augustine Beach. I am the architect for this project. As you heard from Bonnie, this is a commercial building, a mixture of retail and office space in a commercially zoned property. 2-story building, roughly 19,000 square feet. I think per the memo that you've received, we've met all of the requirements for parking. We've presented a landscape plan showing compliance with the city requirements. I think we've also had additional work that came in from the county, both on water and sewer availability, which is, and also I think we had concurrency information provided from the county that we're not triggering any overflows. So we're asking that you approve this project so we can proceed to the next step. So happy to answer any questions.
I have some questions I'd like to ask. I noticed that you're going to have 2 signs on the property. And I wanted to know what they're going to look like, since it's part of needs to come before the Planning and Zoning Board, and there's nothing in the presentation about the signs.
Signage? Yeah.
Yes, the
Yeah,
signage.
so we don't right now know the mix of the tenants, so we don't have a sign design that would comply with that, to show that, because it's going to be, it's not a particular single use, since there are multiple uses, we just didn't design a sign yet for that. But we'll be certainly 100% compliant with any sign ordinance.
Sure you will. I don't see where the air conditioning units are going to be placed.
To be on the roof?
Okay, that's great.
Trying to minimize site coverage and put them, it's very efficient to do that. We did, like all the Seagrove Town Center buildings, all have their, except for the library, have all their AC units on the roof.
Yes, okay. And tell me about the Grasscrete pavers.
So this is very similar, you've probably seen it in multiple projects around town. Salt Life is of course one, where they have asphalt road paths, but they have the Grasscrete. But instead of grass growing in it, it's got gravel in it, because grass is just nearly impossible to try to grow in a parking lot where cars are sitting on it all the time. So, since it's a 40% pervious ratio, we basically try to, minimize our pervious coverage by doing that. Obviously, we'll be in full compliance. We'll have engineers involved doing civil engineering, all permitting through the DEP, through Water Management District as needed for stormwater and everything. We'll be in full compliance with all requirements for the state and the state.
The height will be 35 feet?
Correct. The height you can see on the side, the tower piece.
Measured with a tape measure to make the scale.
Just to make sure, yeah. So that gives it 35 feet, and then, of course, we've got other elements on there that are, some parts of the building aren't 35 feet high. But the highest point is 35 feet.
That's all for right now. Thank you.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, any board discussion?
Yes, I forgot a
Yeah.
question I'd like. May I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stouffer. The fence that butts up against the medium density, could that be an 8-foot fence instead of a 6?
I think the code only allows us to go to 6 foot, but if this code will allow us to go to 8 feet,
In the city of St. Augustine Beach, the fence code is 8 feet.
It's 8 feet, that's why I asked. If you
I don't think that'd be a problem.
Medium density residential on the other
no
side.
problem.
Thank you, I forgot to ask that.
What about the second floor roof canopy? The porch canopy?
What about that?
How does that stick out?
Like the balcony that's on the left side, that balcony protrudes out about 3 feet. You can kind of see it on the plan, 3.5 feet. The roof canopy, that center section recesses a little bit, and then that roof canopy will project out like a normal overhang, probably about 2.5 feet.
It's hard to tell from the drawings. Brian, what's the requirement as far as the setbacks in the porch areas if it's not directly covered? One comment.
All right, Mr. King, so mixed-use districts for a retail shop, it's a two-tiered approach, and I'm just going to read it directly from the code, and we can talk from there. Allowable setbacks are from 0 to 25 feet or more. The minimum setback for a two-story structure with a second-level porch or balcony is 5 feet. The porch not exceeding 5 feet in depth. The maximum height allowed to the roof ridge is 27 feet within the setback areas from 0 to 15 feet. Between 15 and 25, the allowable height is 35. So as Mr. Stauffer has mentioned, in the center, as I understand it, what you're seeing that roof is just really an architectural illustration. That balcony protrudes past that porch. But now if you look to the one to the left, that is a roof balcony. That will comply with the 27-foot when we get into the design phase. So at this point, we have not noticed any issue that is that's in contradiction to the mixed-use code.
Okay. You just can't really tell from the drawing.
Mr. Law, I have a question. Any concern with the entrance and exit both being on Fifth Street for this size of property?
We do not have a concern with that. We have spoken in great detail, and that's why we reached out to Jan Trantham at the county. If you look at her memo, her recommendation was a sidewalk on the fifth side, and that's something I'm sure that the applicants would be more than happy to provide based on the recommendations from the county. But keep in mind, that is city property. So if we want to make that recommendation, this board has to make it as part of the mixed-use order.
For the sidewalk on Fifth Street.
Yeah, and if I might, on another issue with that, the fire marshal, this was sent to the fire marshal, and he came back, the fire marshals they check to make sure entrances, exits work for the fire trucks. And of course, the one thing they do have is a dead end, 150 feet, our one dead end parking is less than 150 feet. So they've actually, might have had a memo from that too, that PJ Webb with the county also reviewed and saw no issues.
I forgot, this is a very nice diagram and drawing of how the front's going to look, but
Mirror image.
Mirror
image on the back. That'll be just flipped.
okay, I forgot to ask that also, thank you.
I didn't do the sides, but, obviously it will.
Any other comments? Okay, we have a public comment. If we could invite Ms. Gruning in?
Hi there.
Good evening.
I am Raina Greening. I live at 209 6th Street, and I just heard about this, so pardon me for being late. Couple of things I had wanted to address, which was what is the space going to look like, and he provided that. I was looking in outside, but after hearing a couple of the things I do have a concern with. One is the retail space. What kind of retail space is going to occupy it? In my opinion, we have more than enough beach supplies and stuff that litter our beaches, and people decide to leave trash. Another thing I wanted to bring is traffic issues and road and being able to turn into. And I just heard that their exit and entrance is going to be off of Fifth Street. Well, that leaves a concern for me. So I live on Sixth. The only entrance and exit I have is either Fifth Street or Seventh Street to get to A1A. Being as though, which another thing I recently found out, all these lots on Seventh Street are being split up to be made into homes, you know, that leaves a concern of how, you know, the backing up of parking at rush hour, people trying to get to work. And now you have this large retail space, you're gonna have people coming in and out of beach parking. I'm sure people are gonna try and scam, you know, and stay there and park there. That's also an issue. So being the one entrance, that's a concern. Another concern is the AC, which I just heard was gonna be on the roof. What's that gonna sound like in my neighborhood? Okay, you know, let's see, garbage along the roads, you know, where is their trash gonna be held? Is it gonna be backing up to my neighborhood? Are they gonna pick it up? Are they going to be responsible for picking it up? Many of these spaces along our A1A that's being provided now, they're not, these retail merchants and restaurants, they're, you know, they're not responsible. And when I walk through my neighborhood, and I believe Max lives within my neighborhood, you know, we go and I pick up trash from tourists and irresponsible people. And it's frustrating, you know, it's frustrating for me. And I moved here because I like the small town feel. Obviously, growth is an issue. It's been an issue for me for a long time, but one of the things is, you know, is it going to continue to grow like this, where it's going to become looking like Daytona or Jack's Beach, and having these multiple retails all along A1A instead of residential, instead of having that community that we have. I'm all for having retail space. I would like to know, what is the retail space going to be? Is it going to be some cheap, you know, buckets? Or is it going to be something eco-friendly and worthy of our community, like a yoga studio or maybe beach bike rentals or something like that? That's all.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
comments.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I'll learn to do this in a minute.
You want to wait just for a second, see if there's any, I'm sorry, see if there's any questions that the the board has for you?
As you can see on the plans, the dumpster will be on the, next to Fifth
She
Street.
can't see the plans.
Did you see the plans? Do they give you?
No, I just saw,
Can we put the plans up?
I just saw
Flip the page.
I just saw the front of it.
And the back will look the same.
So it says 6 feet, but we just spoke with Mr. Stauffer about putting an 8-foot fence, which will help. Okay, so we talked to Mr. Stauffer, and instead of a 6-foot fence, he is willing to put an 8-foot fence, which will help the neighborhood.
Right.
So instead of you seeing the dumpster or having to deal with the dumpster, you're going to have an 8-foot fence, so you're not going to have that problem. You'll see that there.
And a hedge buffer that has to be put in also.
Obviously, the hedge buffer,
If they miss the dumpster, they'll pick it up.
yeah, and you're not going to see it or anything between an 8-foot fence and the hedge. It's not going to be a problem.
It won't degrade your property back, because it'll
And
be
we can-
behind the fence.
Right.
Have the architect explain to us, but I'm pretty sure that the air conditioning units on the top of the buildings is a standard way of building, and not any noisier than if it's in the backyard or wherever else you would put it. It's just aesthetically more pleasing because it's going to be behind the parapet wall, so it'll actually be up on the roof and behind walls.
So what about the,
Quieter on the roof than it will be.
that's fine, but what about the traffic and the entrance and exit being all on Fifth Street? I mean, we have a traffic issue enough within that whole area. People already park from that Kookaburra all along Third Street. You can barely get by as it is there.
True.
So, you know, now, and once they start to build those homes on 7th Street, you're gonna have, I mean, I thought it was 3 lots. Apparently, I just found out today from my
10.
friend who's a realtor, it's split now. So there's 15 homes going in there. So now I have this retail space, you know, I mean, how does that, I mean, is there a way to fix that, or?
We could ask Mr. Stouffer to tell us the traffic, how many trips. I'm sure he's looked that up and has got it, tested that all out. He can tell you.
Mike Stauffer, I don't have that particular piece on me, but we'll see. And and for you to know too, for you to know as well, 4th Street's undeveloped. So right now, it's a cracked 200 feet of nothing. So for us to try to even
It's
exit out on
undeveloped,
it.
but you have a whole development of homes, which is my subdivision and area behind there. That's how we get out.
Right, so the only reason you can't get out 4th Street is the city didn't build a 4th Street. So if the city had built 4th or 6th, I guess you could have more ways out, but they're not there. So this street is not accessible to us because it's really not a road.
Okay.
So we really had no choice. Plus 90+%, unless somebody errantly turns left, they're going to be going out, obviously going out that way. Another thing on the sound side, keep in mind that there are 6 residential lots, 3 on each side, that'll be buffering from the fence and the buffer back. So there'll be houses between the fence and the landscape buffer that's required.
So you're not taking the whole lot then?
No, there's 6 lots in the back that are zoned residential, and they'll be required to be residential construction.
Transient rental.
Any more entrances?
So this, okay,
No,
so
no.
this is A1A, right? Yes, ma'am. And then, so you're
Not a
taking
medium
these
density.
first
We're,
4?
yeah,
Those first 4?
10
And then
with
the
this
limit
would
now.
be Second Avenue?
correct.
Okay. And then, so this is only gonna be your entrance and exit?
The entrance
You're
will
not
be
gonna
right here.
have. Okay. Oh, I got you. Because this one isn't, okay.
Correct.
So there's no entrance or exit here?
No.
Okay.
Does that help you answer
It
some of the
helps me-
questions?
I mean, it helps me visualize it, yeah, it doesn't help the getting out of my neighborhood, but.
And if I'm not mistaken, the Marriott, I think all their AC units are also on the roof.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yes,
know if
they
you
are.
have any issue with that, but you would probably hear them much more significantly because we've got the whole parking lot buffering you because our building is way up here with all our parking behind it. So if you're not hearing that, you will never hear this.
So what kind of businesses are you going to think you're?
We don't know yet because they're obviously they got to design, got to get this approval, then start
Will
getting
there be
leases.
certain ones that you will maybe not?
Well, first, I would probably tell you that the price of and the quality of the building they're building, Joe Schmo dirt rental will not be going in there because he won't afford the rent. These 2 gentlemen are lawyers, and their law firm is going to take part of the upstairs of that. So that's the kind of business they aren't going to want to have in their building with their business, you know, probably the riffraff you're thinking might come.
I'm tired of picking up garbage on the beach, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for
Thank you for explaining.
your comments and your presentation.
Okay.
All
right.
Any other further questions for,
No.
Okay, thank you.
all right, thank you very much. Any other comment from the board or questions from the board?
Mr. Stauffer, I just have one question. The top is going to be offices, is that that's what you had in mind?
The intent is obviously retail doesn't work well on the 2nd floor, and you see from this, with the offices, their law office would go up there, so other offices, and, the common corridor thing feeds better to office space. Obviously, if somebody retailing, I don't know what they would retail, wanted to be on the 2nd floor, I don't know that, it would be, but it wouldn't be a high traffic because you don't want to take retail up and downstairs. The retailers are going to want 1st floor.
Right.
Are you bringing your title company too? Your title company coming too? Is it coming too, Line Title?
Just the law firm. We wrapped the title company into the law firm already, so just the law firm.
Okay.
What's the average square footage of the bottom retail?
The individual spaces are roughly 2,600 to 2,700 square feet in that neighborhood. I'm sure, obviously, the hope would be maybe there's some that combine, but we don't know, again, until we get those walls. We'll have columns in there, so it'll be flexible with some of those walls to be able to.
Are you adding water in those, or
Water in,
like for those that want to use it as a restaurant? Are you adding water? Are you thinking those are gonna be something like bike shops or,
We don't know what that'll be, but restaurants are complicated. I mean, I don't,
right, that's why I'm saying,
no,
are
I
you
mean,
looking?
restaurants are complicated. We get into grease traps, we get into hood vents, you know. I mean, I don't know that if these gentlemen got approached with somebody who said, hey, we want a 9,000 square foot high-end restaurant, would you lease us your ground floor? We'd have to revisit that from a parking perspective, so we'd have to kind of reevaluate the plan, and have to come back to the city for that. So, you know, the restrictions from the restaurant seating capacity do change the dynamic a little bit, so.
And I want to commend you. I actually really like the fact that you have the building in the front and the parking in the back, instead of having us see a parking lot, instead of having a nice building.
Thank you. And that was one of the great things about the ordinance that allowed this mixed use, because it encourages that, to allow the parking in the back. When, you know, you're giving us a little grace, 5 foot on the front setback, and we're doing compliant with the other issues, which is nice. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could we have some discussion about that sidewalk that was mentioned?
Absolutely.
Mr. Law, can you tell, I'm sorry. Could you tell us just a little bit about this, you know, how we would incorporate that if we so desire?
Yes, ma'am. As a mixed use, you do have wide latitudes in what you require. My recommendation, if the board saw fit to add the sidewalk, that they would basically, we would utilize Ms. Trantham's thing. I would recommend pedestrian connection sidewalks be included to connect A1A Beach Boulevard and 5th Street, and a sidewalk along 5th Street frontage. It's obviously not required by our code yet. That is something we're working with the Public Works Director, but we're a little busy right now with everything else going on. So I would just say, and we can get Mike Stauffer involved on this, but we could say they have to provide a 5 foot wide sidewalk, an ADA accessible. We want to make sure the pitch is fine. The length of the commercial, it would basically be a sidewalk to nowhere, but it would let the employees working at the Mercantile and the business occupancies access that sidewalk to get to the boulevard to go for a walk in the middle of the day. So it's a great idea from the county. And basically, you just make you put in your recommendation, we recommend a 5 foot wide sidewalk along 5th Street to the end of the commercial property, which, just to remind everybody, that's 300 feet from the center line of A1A Beach Boulevard. That's your commercial sector on the west side of the boulevard.
Okay.
So the residents from Second Avenue and behind could use it, but they'd have to walk up.
They'd have to get there, and
They'd
then
have to get there from past the residential area.
Yes, ma'am, but possibly, yes, sir. Possibly when they develop those houses down the future, I know of no idea to do that at this time, that they could connect into that sidewalk. But there is no requirement for a single-family residence to build a sidewalk in the city right away. But if it's there, odds are people will connect to it, because it's a great idea, especially when you're only pouring 50 feet per lot.
All right.
And we've discussed before the walkability of the boulevard, and I think this is an attractive addition. The sidewalk will help with the walkability and the pedestrian and the access. Any other comments or questions from any members? No other public comment?
No, not for this one.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Just trying to think how to say it, but yeah.
You want me to take a shot at it?
Certainly, please.
Yeah,
Let's make sure we include the 8-foot fence as a recommendation.
I got that, yeah.
This is just my recommendation, just to get us started. We recommend approval of the submitted mixed-use 2-story building with the conditions of an 8-foot fence on the west side of the property and a 5-foot sidewalk adjacent to 5th Street, as recommended by St. Johns County Transportation.
Okay, would anybody like to make that their motion?
So moved.
Any second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion?
And A1A as well, correct? You just said
The
5th Street.
sidewalk.
It's already there, it shows
Yeah.
that.
There's a sidewalk there.
Yeah, it's all along there.
There is, yeah.
They've got to maintain that.
There we go. So if we look next to the Avenue of Palms, there is a sidewalk. There's a pedestrian crossing there and pedestrian crossing there. Potentially a sidewalk could go here, and then they can hit this pedestrian crosswalk and shoot across and go to the beach.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Good job, Mr. Law.
Great job.
Thank you, good luck.
Good luck.
Huh? Quick enough.
Right here.
Who's going to be your problem?
Yes. Okay. Next order of business is a final development, modification to the final development order at Sea Colony.
This is a final development modification order to modify all the final development orders issued for Sea Colony, which was built in 4 phases, phases 1 through 4. Sea Colony is zone low-density residential. It is not a planned unit development. It was developed as what was called back in the 90s as a cluster development, which we don't even have in our land development code right now. I'll let Mr. Law explain more about it because I believe cluster development was a floodplain management resource that the intent was to keep the density the same. 4 units per acre is allowed for low-density residential. Sea Colony does not exceed that, but the intent of the cluster development was to put the development on the good land and the land that doesn't drain so well or flood that was left open. What this modification application is proposing no way is intended to exceed the design parameters that Sea Colony already has in place and has been utilizing since it was developed in the late 90s. This modification is intended to protect the residents of Sea Colony in the event of a natural disaster, which could cause substantial damage to a structure. If there was a major flood event or storm event, most of the residents in Sea Colony would not be able to rebuild their houses on their current footprint because the setbacks, the building height, and the impervious coverage they are not referenced in most of the final development orders, which you guys have copies of. Some of the setbacks are referenced, but none of them reference building height or total lot coverage. I'm going to bring Mr. Law into this. He's a lot more of an expert in the design code for Sea Colony. And then the applicant is here, Mr. McGarvey, who's representing the Sea Colony ARB and the HOA.
Great job, Bonnie. When I first got here about 2.5 years ago, a house came in from Sea Colony, and I was asking questions, why? So we went all the way back to the beginning in the 90s. I believe it was called the Fleeman Tract. I went all the way back to when the school board had a lien on some of the property for something. Pretty interesting history read. A lot of reading, though. Well, it turns out, as I understand it, Sea Colony thought they were a planned unit development, and they're not. All the development orders, one of them refers to a cluster development, the other ones refer to low-density residential. By that logic, they have to adhere to the land development code. Well, they haven't. So you heard Ms. Miller talk about in the event of a natural disaster. Everybody knows Sea Colony is an ocean-borne community. If those buildings become substantially damaged, 50% or greater, and we're not even talking about floodplain management yet, just 50% or greater, the zoning code will not allow that building to be reconstructed. It would have to come into compliance. So there's certain phases that have 5-foot setbacks in there. That's how they were designed. So this is an attempt to bring them into compliance. The city's been issuing permits for over 20 years. The subdivision's nearly completely built out. Just like we did with Anastasia Dunes, it's time to bring them into compliance, so if we do have a natural disaster, we're not coming to the board for 122 variances. As far as cluster developments, that is a floodplain management tool. It's an effective use of existing property. We build on the good land. We let the rest of the land become passive or active or some sort of recreation or drainage. Sea Colony is one of the best subdivisions I've ever seen laid out in regard to the coastal construction control line and the high-velocity wave action. Prior to the flood map change in December of 2018, they were all on X's and X shaded. Great. 500-year flood event and 100 to 500-year. Unfortunately, with the new map change, about 8 or 10 properties, the AO kind of bumped their corners a little bit. No big issue because these houses are 2 or 3 feet up off the ground. Not a floodplain issue, but that's where cluster developments come from. So in conjunction with that, between the HOA, the ARB, and the developer, they've submitted paperwork out of their design manual. I do not want to adopt their entire design manual. The city should not be responsible for architectural profiling, or anything like that in single-family residences. The setbacks, the lot coverage, total lot coverage in ISR, we care about dramatically. This answers all the unanswered questions, and of course, the towers. Towers in Sea Colony do exist. There's, based on the types of lots, different square footages, and we have that in the design manual. That's not part of what they are presenting, but if the board does move down this path with recommendations, I do strongly suggest we specify the square footage based on the lot sizes for the towers. So those towers are up to 42 feet tall. The community is built that way. It's been built that way since the 90s. And they were built under a different, I call them towers, but they were called scenery lofts, as I understand it from the city manager. That was a part of the land development codes in the 90s. So that's how that all started, where the code's been changed many times. The scenery lofts did not exist when I showed up here in 2017. So, I mean, really at this point they're trying to bring their subdivision into compliance. This is not an attempt to build any buildings bigger than what they've been building. The ARB is still strong over there. But my department suffers a little bit because what codes are we to use? And I spoke with the former attorney about the towers a year and a half ago, and he had instructed me any attempt to stop this now would bring liability on the city. So there has been a couple of houses that have been permitted when I've been here, but they have complied with 35% lot coverage and the 40% ISR through the use of the 10% pavers and that. You will see, as you go through your documents, if you haven't had time yet, the flag lots are not being shown as any setbacks due to the unique characteristics of the lot. Mr. McGarvey can speak extensively about those. That is problematic for an enforcement standpoint. I do not like unknowns when I review a site plan. I recommend 5-foot minimum sides. That will help us comply with the fire separation table from the building code. And some people I've heard over the years say that they're 4 stories. They are not 4 stories. And I'm going to give a little history on why they can't be a 4-story building. The single-family residential buildings are under the guidance of the Florida Building Code residential, which only applies to 3 stories or less. If they build a 4th story, that puts them in the commercial code, which means the entire residential facility has to be sprinklered. Now, they can go up to 42 feet, but we don't allow an intermediate floor. So imagine if you have a 250-foot scenery loft, that could be utilized for a gym, a desk, all kinds of things. So we don't allow that. We make them remove all the trusses, it becomes an open shaft. And we do allow a walkway around the outside to get for maintenance on the windows. But these are not 4-story buildings, they are 3 stories for that reason.
Could you tell me
Yes, sir.
the pages that were submitted for us to look at? There's 3 of them.
All right, let me get my book.
Amendment to the final development orders with the little sketches. Who provided that information? Did you?
No, that came from the developer, the HOA. It was a multiple effort. But if you will look at the pictures. So if you tell me what page you're looking at right now, I'm going to show you the design code we have that we took offline.
Page 2, I guess it's 3 of, page 3? I'm not.
The amendment to the
The
final.
one that's not numbered?
Yeah, it's not numbered.
All right, well, I'm going to show you what the pictures look like. So this is their design manual that I understand that the ARB
And we can't.
and the HOA review the plans by. So as you're going to start seeing, and just bear with me with, it's not going to work. So we'll take this picture for example, and we'll better than that. We don't like that either. But anyways, if we look at the house, or the sketch on the left, that's the dune lots, the middle's the cottage lots, those are your 5-foot setbacks I was talking about. Then we get to the larger lots, the wooded lots. And then it keeps going. So we have the oceanfront lots here.
See cottage dune.
Villa lots, flag lots.
Yes, ma'am.
The page about information from the lot coverage,
The first one he
building
showed was
heights.
partly this
Who
and
provided that
something else.
information?
The applicants. All right, so now you're going to see, now we're going to talk about lot coverage for a little bit. Part of subdivision building, some subdivisions do not utilize lot coverage and ISR as individuals. Engineered subdivisions will allow for total coverage. That basically says, Seagrove's a perfect example. They're allowed 60% lot coverage. That means you can build the building, you have to meet their square footages, you have to meet their setbacks, But that's all the hardscaping. That's everything. That's the lot, the driveways, and that's all built in developing a subdivision as a whole. We're used to seeing 50 by 93 lots in our medium density sectors. There were no drainage. When they platted those in the 50s, it was chop it up, let's make it mathematically even, and just keep trucking. They take this whole facility, all of Sea Colony is one entity, and that's where they get these calculations from. I cannot provide you those calculations. We looked and looked. We are unable to provide those. 60%, 65% is not unheard of in subdivisions, but this is what they're asking for, so that's why we're here, so we can debate and make the best solution that we can.
How many empty lots are there?
I can't answer that, but I'm sure there's representatives outside that can probably answer that a whole lot better than I can. I mean, we can do aerial imagery. I mean, it's not going to be exact.
Just, I'm sure there's a known quantity of what's
We can go,
available.
we can bring in the rest of the board members from that community, and they can probably answer that.
Okay, that'll be.
So is there going to be a challenge to figure out the new numbers once the houses come up for permits?
No, what would happen is if approved as submitted with my recommendations regarding the towers and the flag lots, we would identify what kind of lot it is, and we would go straight to, let's say it's an oceanfront lot. Front build to zone, that's a fun one. But it is explained in their code, so once you understand that, but side setback 7.5, rear 18, garage front, and you'll see that exceptions for flag lots below. So basically, we identify which lot it is, then we go to that part of the tables. But like I said, without this, in the event of there's nothing saving Sea Colony from a direct impact. There's no buffers.
There's only 8 lots in the flag lots.
I would have to look at the map, but I trust you.
A1, A2, A14, 15. It lists
It does.
lots, so you're only dealing with 8 lots out of the whole development that are flag lots.
But with flag lots, I do strongly recommend that we institute a 5-foot side setback.
I agree.
I got a point of information, may I?
Sure.
I've been here before. I'd like to introduce myself again. My name is Jay McGarvey, and I live in St. Johns County, and I developed Sea Colony. Actually, let me just first say that there are 8 flag lots on the beach, and those flag lot setbacks are the same as the oceanfront lot setbacks, okay? The only difference with flag lots is that they may have, and if you look at the oceanfront lot side setbacks, they're 7.5 feet. Right? They're still 7.5 feet. That doesn't change. The only thing that changes, and there's a reference there to flag lots, is the fact that in our ARB, and I think I mimicked everything that we, for clarity, everything that is in our ARB in the amendment to these final development orders. Those flag lots may have the garage be designated as a courtyard garage. Otherwise, all of the other oceanfront lots have a front-end garage. When you drive by there, they're all front-end because those lots are 75 feet wide by well, they go to the ocean, but they all have a retaining wall behind them. So the flag lot idea, Brian, is only to let the flag lots have a courtyard garage. That's all. But the same setbacks for oceanfront lots that you see on your presentation apply. And those would be, sides are 7.5, rears are 18 feet. The garage setbacks, the reason I have that note under there in your notes is that it really just applies to garages for flag lots. And then I'll sit down now, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
We have no objection to flag lots being regulated the same as ocean lots as far as setbacks.
So the 5 feet, it would still be 7.5 feet.
We will go exactly with, I only say 5 feet because that's the minimum separation between overhangs to a lot line before we get into fire rating.
Okay.
So we have no objection to that.
Mr. Law, remember last month we had the pool issue in the, for NC Colony? Does this affect that at all? No?
Well, that pool is still in review. It has
Right.
a couple technical issues that we're working through. If you approve this as submitted, you would allow the total coverage for the, I believe he submitted 65%, but once again, we can debate and talk about that. If that was the law for Sea Colony, they would not be allowed that 465 square foot exception, as that did pass, by the way. They would not be granted that, because they're already being allowed 65% total coverage. That was designed to help the low-density lots that have concrete driveways. It's not intended for the equivalent of a PUD. Perfect example is Seagrove again. I hate to keep going there, but they're one of our few PUDs. They're limited to 60% total. It doesn't matter what laws we pass. That's what they're governed by, but they're a PUD. In all honesty, this should have been a PUD. It's designed as a PUD. It just didn't get there, whether I wasn't in the 90s, I was in the military. I couldn't tell you what was going on here. But this is a way to do it, and that 65% is a pretty generous number. Now, if the board feels the 465 square foot exception for low density for pools still should apply, then we can do that. It's up to you to decide to instruct us.
That's two separate issues.
Yes, ma'am. It would be a point of clarification if you make the recommendation, because I'll have to explain this to the commission at the next available meeting.
Okay, so if you could clarify for us your recommendation then.
My recommendation is to take the design code as submitted, just the components we need, setbacks, the tower heights, and I do want to go over that real fast just to show you. What I don't want is a blanket 42 foot without giving guidelines. So if the ARB has been enforcing this, then I feel comfortable that's what we should continue. All right, so we're going to start here. And once again, you're probably not going to be able to see it too well. A little bit better. So this is where we see the word, if you see right here in the bottom, the scenery lofts. As I understand it, that was in the code from the 90s. That's where it begins. Maximum height of 42 feet. And it goes into some other stuff. You can't put a kitchen, bathroom. It's exactly what it sounds like, a scenery loft. So we go to the next page. And that's not the page I want. So we're going to flip the book a little bit.
Yeah, we don't have any of these. Don't have these.
Can I ask why we weren't presented those papers in our information packet, this particular one?
What's that, on scenery lofts?
Scenery loss.
Yeah.
They didn't submit it. I mean, this is all for questioning. But I'm more than
I
happy
mean,
to
they
get everybody a
submitted
copy.
the others, didn't they?
Yeah, I can't explain what was submitted and what was not,
I get
but I
it.
didn't feel prudent, as I was off last week, not to bring up the towers for this board to weigh in on them. I will find it eventually. Oh, it was right. All right. So we see here oceanfront towers. It talks about 42 foot. It's saying the tower is limited to 500 square feet with a maximum of 400 square feet included, or enclosed, including stairs. And it breaks it down. Dune, scenery loft, 250 square feet. Cottages, 150, and so on. So it breaks them down. Now, I would recommend, if we're going to do the flag lots the same as the oceanfront lots, that the same thing applies. We move all the oceanfront lot restrictions to the flag lots. And also a recommendation, as we were talking earlier about the ISR and lot coverage, that if you do decide on this path, that maybe you put a condition that no variances shall be allowed to exceed the maximum lot coverage and ISR. That would stop anybody from going, let's say, to 85%. That's up to your board.
Can we put a precondition on something that says you can't file for a variance?
We've done it before. We can ask the city attorney. I mean, variance, in my opinion, can be applied for anything, but you're asking for a modification to the development order. So idea?
Yeah, I mean, you can. By putting it in there, it's a suggestion, the board can still change. So it's just, it has some merit, but it would not preclude of a variance in the future. It just basically is information that the board is not, the board of now would not be interested in entertaining variances.
Okay.
Maybe we can use the undue hardship phrase. Applicants,
I mean,
I know that's built into our codes through and through, but maybe this just helps
It won't-
reiterate that point.
It won't limit the power of this board to, down the road, give a variance. It just would set a precedent that the board isn't really interested in providing variances out in that area.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Law? Okay, can we hear from the applicant again, please?
Got it all up here. Hi, Jay McGarvey.
Just want to give you a chance to add anything. I know you jumped in on a certain part, but if you had a,
Thank you.
okay.
Brian gave you a little bit of history. Actually, the city didn't have PUDs back when we did this. We wanted a PUD badly, but they just didn't have that in their zoning code. It was, if it's been updated recently to get it out of the dark ages, it was really in the dark ages back then. So the cluster development seemed to work. And actually, nice bit of history. This amendment really, and correct me if I'm wrong, comes forward at the request of the staff to make their job easier. And basically, it is an identical, Xerox of this. Flag lots are oceanfront lots anyway, just so no problem. I mean, we think that, we think this is simply a tool for the members of your committee, Mr. Kincaid and Brian and his staff, to make good decisions relative to Sea Colony. Doesn't change a thing, quite frankly.
Any questions of Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. How many lots do you still have that are unsold?
Oh, none.
They're all sold, they've
Oh, yeah.
all been built on?
No, they have not all been built on.
But they've been sold?
But they've been all sold for a dozen years, 8, 10.
They just haven't chose to build?
Sure, yes, exactly.
Have no build-out cutoff date or anything like that?
Tell you what we did. We did have a build-to date, but when the Great Recession came, and some folks, because as you know, we've done a number of communities around here, we relaxed all those and basically said, because we didn't want to, those were our customers and those were real human beings, and it didn't make any sense to put them in any sort of peril or harm's way. So we relaxed those. And so there is no build-to date at this point. You're just supposed to keep your lot in all of our communities in a park-like condition.
So this is just, the changes were asked by the homeowners association?
Actually, there are no changes. These aren't changes in any way.
Modifications?
No, not modifications, simply clarifications. That's all they are, to put these.
We're not.
It's housekeeping, to put these things in front of you, Mr. Mithers.
We're not doing a modification of existing final development order.
In code. All you're doing is simply modifying the final development orders because they did not include this information. But Sea Colony has been built and has been governed by the same information since day one.
So this is bringing the final development order into line with the community guidelines that are already existing.
Well said, thank you, sir.
The tower information packets, we didn't receive them. We received other packets and sketches, but those were not submitted, the 42 feet towers.
Yes. No particular reason. 42 feet, we thought was 42 feet.
Was
so
a nice number,
That's the number it's been for 20 years.
I'm sure.
Any further questions from the board? Do we have some?
So how
I'm
many
sorry.
of those houses that still need to be built are supposed to have those towers?
I can't tell you that specifically, but if there are some oceanfront lots, they're allowed to have towers. And estate lots are allowed to have towers. And I think I think someone said that there are 8 lots remaining without a house on there. Somebody said that? I don't know.
8 flag lots.
8 flag lots.
Flag lot.
Oh, yeah.
There were 8.
Yeah. So let me just say, the few estate lots that remain without a house and the few oceanfront houses without a house would be those eligible. What we call dune lots or cottage lots or villas are on smaller lots and they're not eligible for towers.
Any other questions? Okay, we may have some questions in a minute, but we have some public comment. So
Thank
if
you.
we can,
Okay.
speakers.
Thank you very much.
Chris LaValle? State your name and address.
Chris LaValle at 864 Ocean Palm Way, Sea Colony. I'm not quite sure how this is going to play out because we just bought a property.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, that's me.
We just bought a piece of property in Sea Colony. I'm also a resident there, been there about 4.5 years. And really what it boils down to is that I want to ensure that I'm playing by the same rules that I thought I had when I purchased the lot. And that's what concerns me. The community is almost completely built out. There are a few lots that are left, and I'm one of them, but I intend on building. I had hoped on building sooner than later, but with the current situation, things may be a little delayed. And I had intended on putting a tower. I just want to make sure that I know that the rules that I thought will still apply to me. And that's really my biggest concern. And, you know, if it is just basically adopting it into, then so be it. But if you're taking a footprint for something just to make somebody's job easier, if I understood that correctly, I don't think that's really fair in terms of I'm not afforded that same right that all the other homeowners in that community had. And that's really all I'm asking for is that same right that the other homeowners, because I'm familiar with the plans. And that's why I purchased it. I knew what rules I'd be playing by, and I don't want those pulled out from under me at the last minute, especially with a substantial investment. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Mr. LaValle? Hang on, Brian?
I would just like to comment on what Mr. McGarvey said and what was just said. This does not make my job any easier by any means. This is bringing an existing subdivision and its development order, we're merging them together so they're compliant. We have no intent my department has no intent to make the rules stricter or easier. All we're trying to do is make the subdivision match the development order in the event of a natural disaster. If approved what we recommend, then you'd be entitled to the same rights the entire subdivision was constructed by. But it is not an opinion that it makes my life easier. Easier is medium density setback. 10, 25, we're out the door. This is just bringing the buildings into compliance so they don't become into a non-conforming status in the event of a natural disaster where they're 50% damaged.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern. I just want to make sure that in the event that I do build and I do lose the home, that I can rebuild the same way without having to go through a bunch of hurdles. I want to know that the rules will apply to me today, tomorrow, and 10, 20 years from now. Because I love the community so much that I actually plan on building a bigger home in there. Probably not the smartest thing at my age, but I love the neighborhood. So it is my retirement thing, so that's what I want. But thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. LaValle?
Do you feel comfortable, though?
Very much.
I do.
Okay.
I just wanted to make my point, but I think after hearing some, I kind of got an idea of what it was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Michael Stauffer.
Yep.
And everybody saw the one that we already got in our packet from the other person, right?
That was it on public comment? No.
We got a person.
Good evening again.
Put a-
Again?
I just don't go away. Michael Stauffer, 1093A1A Beach Boulevard, St. Augustine Beach. Having been involved with Sea Colony since 1998, I actually worked with Mr. McGarvey as an architect and wrote the design guidelines. I served on the review board for at least 10 years and have designed probably at least 30 homes in Sea Colony. Essentially, these rules that you see before you are the same rules that I wrote in these guidelines with Jay at the beginning, the same rules I followed from the beginning as an architect, having to comply with the requirements of St. Augustine. Brian and I had conversations about this because I was doing a house that had a similar issue because he couldn't find the codes and things. So this is just basically bringing the rules that have been in place for 22 years or whatever it's been, to codify them, to make them part of the document. So it basically becomes part of your LDRs at this point. That's kind of been part of a design code that was used by the ARB. And I will tell you that if you've never been before this ARB, it's the toughest ARB I've ever been in front of. We were tough, they're tough, and they comply with these rules pretty strictly. So I think it's good to know that it's finally going to be codified. We all thought it was, because we've all been following these rules since for 22 years. I did some quick math. There might even be 15 total lots in that community out of 225 that aren't built on yet. So, we're really, for new construction, obviously it would be great for them to be able to comply with the rules that have been in place. And obviously, if a event of a natural disaster, heaven forbid, the people would be able to build back in their conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any comment from the board?
Are we going to talk about this letter? Because
I was just going to ask if anybody wants to comment about the letter, we can.
I don't think we're changing anything. She doesn't like the 42-foot, towers, but,
They're there, ma'am, all,
right, yeah.
everybody's there. They've been there for 20 years.
And they're just oceanfront lots.
Well, and
No, ma'am.
No, they're,
Front end estate.
in a state, that's right, I'm sorry.
And we don't know how many those are. They could be 10 or they could be 200.
Michael said 15. Oh, you mean existing in there already? Or
No.
to be built?
No, Mr. Stauffer said there's 225
Yeah, he said there was
lots that
15
are
left.
still.
About 15, no.
Out of
there's
225 total, there's
Oh, there's
15,
15 left,
maybe
okay.
15 that are unsold,
I would like to
or
point
unbuilt
out,
on.
Okay.
Sorry.
in addition, towers or scenery lots are not allowed on villa and sanctuary lots. By that statement and the following, where we see oceanfront dune cottages, towers they're going to be regulated. Let's lose it again.
So they would be allowed on the oceanfront and the flag lots and the estate lots, right?
They would be allowed on any lot with the exception of villa and sanctuary lots as per their design manual. Oh, it's right there. So there we look, we see the oceanfront towers again, dune towers, cottage towers.
No, wait, Mr. McGarvey just said only estate and oceanfront.
I missed the tower, I missed the dune lot.
So let's go back over this again, just to make sure we can get it clear for everybody, if that's okay. So once again, I'm going to read, in addition, towers or scenery lots are not allowed on Villa and Sanctuary. To me, that means if you're on those two lots, I shouldn't see anything higher than 35 feet tall. No towers. Then it goes through with limitations based on the type of lots. The oceanfront tower, scenery lofts, 500 square feet. It goes in a little more restrictive from there. The dune towers, 250. The cottage towers, 150 square feet total. So it's based on the lot type. So that's one of the maps you see where they break the lots down. So when, let's say we had a submittal and it was just, this isn't real, but lot 47. You know, we found lot 47 on the plats. We looked at that. We saw it was a sanctuary lot. And we saw a tower in the design, we would just cease and desist, because now the whole building would have to be redesigned because it can't have a tower. And once again, they could, after talking with this new city attorney, they could apply for a variance. They would have to show an undue hardship is the phrase that we would like to use as a department.
Okay, and if I could clarify something else, Mr. McGarvey, you said you don't own any more lots in there, right? They're all sold?
Well, I have one lot that is under contract to close in a week.
Okay.
The letter must be true.
And that's actually a personal lot that we bought 20 years ago.
Okay.
So it's a resale.
A resale. I was hoping to build a house there.
I would like to point out for the record, I knew nothing of that lot until we saw an email. This started over a year ago with me and Mr. Stauffer.
So that's the one that's contingent?
I can't answer that. But just one more page, Joe, just to finish up with the towers. There's wooded and estate lots, and it talks about towers on the bottom there. It is pretty all-inclusive.
So there's a lot of these lots, it's not just 25 lots, 25 of them left.
No, there's 15 lots left, but should there be damage in the community of greater than 50% to one of the buildings, they would not be able to rebuild their building under our current guidelines.
That's what this is for, to make sure that they can.
Yes, ma'am, I prepare for the worst. If a hurricane comes ashore, that's the most vulnerable subdivision
And
as a
we might be
subdivision.
looking at several hundred variances at that point, whereas if we,
Right, I get that.
okay. Okay, any further discussion or questions from the board?
I think the tower information should have been included, but other than that,
Absolutely.
it's okay.
Be included
I feel
upon your
like we were
recommendation.
blindsided on that. I don't like not having all of the information. We have that, we should have gotten that paper.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, I'll
gonna
agree to
change
disagree,
anything.
because we're not changing anything.
Right.
You know, you were just informing us of that situation.
If you
of
read what
that
was,
tower
yes,
means.
ma'am. If you read what was presented, it would leave a loophole in the code, and everybody knows I don't like loopholes.
And we're not changing.
No, ma'am.
We're just protecting the people if there's a disaster.
We will and make sure that it is included at the next board meeting.
Okay with it.
Okay, do we have a motion then?
Don't you want to make a stab at that again?
Okay?
You're better that, well, I want to make sure that undue hardship is put in there as well.
So keep in mind, mine is just a recommendation.
All right.
Recommend approval of the submittal documents regarding the modification to the final development orders of Sea Colony subdivision with the limitation of towers being limited to the square footages as per their architectural review board and their design manual. Current design manual, and that will be part, I'm going to stop my motion right there for a minute. That's going to actually be part of the submittal documents with the motion. So it's galvanized in the code, so 30 years from now, when I'm sipping rum on an island somewhere, painting faces on coconuts or something, the next person will have it. They can go back in time. So we address the towers, and flag lots shall be regulated as oceanfront lots in regards to setbacks and tower construction.
So by adding current in there, they can't change their ARB regulations and change our,
No, sir, the intent of this is to galvanize the design manual for ARB, and this is what Sea Colony will be held accountable for.
as it is
For
currently.
its duration. So we will make sure everything you have, plus the tower information, is included.
Okay.
And we probably will white out any page numbers. So, because it's going to be somebody like me, page 3, 6. What happened to 4 and 5? Be confusing in 20 years from now. So what else did we talk about as far as changing to their order?
Didn't we say not to
No
exceed
variances?
6 Right.
Undo.
Okay. So let's add, and we're going to put it all back together in a minute to make it easy for the recording secretary, hopefully. And the variances, we want to put all variance requests for, or outside of this final development order shall be required to provide an undue hardship.
Must be.
Must, we can use must. Must is an acceptable code word. Keep in mind that is part of your code anyways. It just reiterates the emphasis that variances will be taken very seriously. Not that they're not now, but it's a warning.
And we don't have to add anything in about the 5 feet because they're willing to go to the 7.5 feet that exists.
So as long as we put in the development order that we're going to regulate flag lots as oceanfront lots, I think that just takes care of all of it.
Okay.
All right, so you ready for me to try again?
Yes.
Yes, please.
All right, so we did, I'm going to get it in my head real fast. Towers first, flag lots as ocean lots, undue hardships variances. All right. Recommend approval of the modification of the final development orders regarding Sea Colony subdivision as demonstrated by submittal documents, and tower shall be regulated as per the current design manual. Towers. Flag lots shall be regulated as oceanfront lots. And any variance request shall have to demonstrate an undue hardship.
Must.
Okay. Anybody like to make that their motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, can we do a roll call vote?
Mr. Mithers?
No.
Mr. Prentice?
Aye.
Mr. Kincaid?
Aye.
Ms. Odom?
Aye.
Mr. Cyrus?
Aye.
Ms. Longstreet?
No.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 5-2. Thank you. Okay, we have on the schedule now a presentation by Mr. Tredick. Okay, so we will not be doing that. Is there any old business on the board? I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chair, I just wanted to say, yes, Mr. Tredick is not here, and we are continuing that presentation until the board's next meeting, which is not going to be in April. We have no new applications for the April meeting. The cutoff date for applications was yesterday at 5 p.m. So we are officially canceling the April PZB meeting. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, May 19th, 6 p.m. And at that meeting, we will have Mr. Tredick make his presentation.
Okay, thank you.
So take next month off.
Are you going to introduce the attorney?
And introduce Mr. Lex Taylor, Douglas Law Firm. Come up and give the board an intro and a brief bio.
All right. Hello, my name is Lex Taylor. I'm one of the attorneys at the Douglas Law Firm, and we were recently hired by the commission to represent you all. We're very proud to have that responsibility. Charlie Douglas's law firm has been representing the Putnam County School Board for over 6 years, and we've done a good job with that, we hope. We hope to bring that to you. I have previous experience working on the Joint Economic Committee in Washington, D.C., and also worked for Hillsborough County as a legislative aide. I'm hopeful, and our plan is for me to be your routine attorney at these meetings and at the code enforcement meetings. I have a little bit more experience with some of those issues than Charlie does, and Charlie will probably be the regular for the General Commission meetings. If you've got any questions, we want to be here and make ourselves available. We have a local office here at the Record Building where I normally work. So if you have any questions, you can come see us there, or we can come see you. But we want to be available. I know also that we are working with staff to set up a Sunshine Law refresher course for some of the newer members or from the members that might want to do that. At this time, we're kind of trying to see what happens with everything with the coronavirus and what's easy, what's not. I mean, if this is a prolonged thing, then we'll probably do that by some sort of virtual. I also wanted to update this board because I know there was some interest in whether or not people could appear telephonically. We're going to figure out some way to do that. The governor has done an executive order 2020-69, which allows for you all to appear telephonically or electronically. So most likely it'll be some sort of WebEx, Zoom. I know there's a couple other providers. The IT people here are working to figure out what the best one is for that. We believe that'll be available by the May meeting, should you choose to do that. And the one thing on our end is to make sure that we allow for meaningful public comment, and especially for this board, for there to be some meaningful way for people to bring demonstrations and evidence in. So we'll work with all those things and have them done by the next meeting. And again, if you have any questions for me, I'm here and available.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Will we have
Any
his
questions?
email address will it be on the website or?
It will, but we'll make sure we send it out to all 9 members of the Planning and Zoning Board, their emails, phone numbers, and names, along with the address of their office.
Thank you.
All right.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor?
Welcome.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, any old business on the board? Any board comment? Okay. Anybody ready to adjourn?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.